Hello and welcome to the latest Royal Roundup from TalkTV. So pop the kettle on. This is the Royal Tea. I'm Sarah Hewson. On today's show, we'll find out which royal wanted to sue Netflix over The Crown and how Harry and Meghan are planning to build their own universe. More on that later. Joining me today are royal commentator and TalkTV host Daisy McAndrew, the royal editor at the Evening Standard Robert Jobson, and royal commentator and historian Dr Tessa Dunlop. Welcome to you all. Thanks very much for being with us this week. So let's start with the King, who celebrated his 74th birthday this week and was pictured in his new role as Ranger of Windsor Great Park. His first birthday as monarch. Robert, how did he spend the day?
Well, he spent it privately. I mean, he would have enjoyed that time. The photograph they released had its critics, but I thought it was quite a nice photograph, very artistic. It's good for the broadsheets, but
quite moody.
Not so much for the
oak tree
showing the deep roots of the royal monarchy, I suppose. But yeah, it had its critics. I think the tabloids didn't particularly like it because they had to sort of crunch it into the papers. But he had a private. And on that day, they announced that he was going to be the Ranger taking over at Windsor Great Park.
I mean, it must have been extraordinary. He's very lucky in a way to have reached 74 and for that to be his first birthday without his parents around. I mean, how lucky would any of us be to have? But having said that, it still must have been very poignant not having his mother around, having the gun salutes at the Tower of London and in Green Park. So all of that, and the Household Cavalry playing Happy Birthday at Changing the Guard. So all of those bits. But I was reflecting, Sarah, because I was doing some reporting from outside Buckingham Palace on that morning and thinking 74 years to the day beforehand. He was born in Buckingham Palace, the first royal baby to be born without the Home Secretary present to make sure that the royal baby really was the royal baby, that when it's presented. I mean, it's extraordinary.
I think it was there was that with the Queen when she was born. It was on the cusp of a general strike, and Justin Hicks was there. He had to be there, and that was just as important as worrying about the general strike.
Because we've said so often throughout the Queen's reign and life, how she was a link to the past, but really, so is King Charles.
Yeah.
He's like the first baby boomer, and what I love most of all, when he was born, Philip was playing squash because men in those days did not hover around their women.
Two announcements to come out this week. One on the King's birthday, that he wrote to the House of Lords and asked them to extend the list of councillors of state. Now, we've talked about this before, adding Prince Edward and Princess Anne onto the list. It looks now like this is going to pass through the motions of democracy in Parliament and be a reality. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's important, but that he's being supported by Anne and Edward in this way. But really, it's only for when he's out of the country or when he can't. I think the other thing that's important is they're not taking it away from anybody else.
Well, I was going to ask this in terms of the politics around
it's
this,
not
the
being
family
removed
dynamics.
from Harry. It's not being removed from Andrew. But there's been all honesty. It's not going to ever get to that situation. This is making sure that situation is covered and that only working royals can do this role. And I think that all makes perfect sense.
It's interesting, there's been a little bit of a pushback in the House of Lords just today about this from Lord Fawkes, saying that it's being rushed through. And it does have an air, I think, of being rushed. I can see it's a fudge. They don't want to upset Andrew and Harry, so they're adding to rather than sort of fixing. But it is a piece of legislation. And I understand why some members of the House of Lords are uncomfortable with the fact it's going so fast.
But the House of Lords doesn't like doing anything quickly.
Yes.
But the truth is, we've got a slimmed down coronation, and it's, I think, arrived sooner than we thought it would in May. And we've got to therefore get the show on the road. Charles is going to have to go out there and present himself to his other realms, and we need backup. And that backup can't be
Princess of Wales are going to be out of the country.
He will be. I mean, he's
so
going to be away. I think the spring. There will be one visit before the coronation. And I don't want to talk about slimmed down coronation. Well, I think we should wait and see. I think it'll be pretty spectacular. I think it'll be bells and whistles. So I don't think it's going to be that slimmed down.
Now, it is hard to remember a week that has gone by without a story about the Crown recently, and this week is no different. The latest report is that Queen Elizabeth II's late husband, Prince Philip, wanted to sue Netflix over his portrayal. Tessa, let's get your thoughts on this. What specifically upset the late Duke?
This was in an earlier episode where Philip, as a child, was portrayed as being in some way responsible for his beloved sister Cecile's death, not just her death, but wiped out her entire family. They were flying over, and it was a fabrication. As young Philip was given agency in her decision to fly. That was a nonsense. She did. Her whole family were wiped out in 1937, and it was deeply traumatic, especially for this itinerant prince who had effectively grown up in a what we'd call now a dysfunctional family living across a continent. And what's interesting to me is we've focused all our ire and anxiety on, oh no, this portrayal of recent events, it's going to hurt everyone in the royal family, because we didn't give the initial or the first series so much agency. For us, they were just a half-forgotten past most of us hadn't lived through. Most of us, except, of course, the very old Duke, who lived it all. And understandably, it felt raw. It was raw. He watched it. He watched it, and I believe he told the Queen not to watch it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Apparently, that's what he said. I'd heard that he did watch it, which is probably why he was so irritated. Yeah. And he said to her, "Don't watch it; it'll just irritate you."
Tessa, the reason
but a lot of people loved it, didn't they? That first one.
Is because Tessa's just written a book, just published, Elizabeth and Philip, about the relationship between the late Duke and the Queen. And Tessa, we're in a new age now with a new monarch. This is very much focusing on that very long marriage. We have a monarch now who's on his second marriage. Is that more reflective of the age we're in, and what sort of lessons do you think are learned from the past?
I focus particularly on their early relationship. This Sunday, the 20th of November, they would have been married for 75 years. When they got married in 1947, it was a record-breaking year for young couples crashing down the aisle who hardly knew each other. Philip and Elizabeth.
Years.
Yeah, post-war years. But Philip and Elizabeth did actually know each other a bit. He was to the manor born, a third cousin, no less. But they were held up as the mid-20th century ideal, the pin-up for the nuclear family. The state used them, the church used them to embolden this message of family first. Remember, there was campaigning for divorce laws that weren't going to be changed for a couple of decades. And they carried their generation with them. This was family monarchy. And I would suggest that now in the 21st century, we need to find, or the Windsors need to find, as potent a message as that, to carry with them this more diverse, more flexible generation. That's a far harder gig, by the way.
And what kind of message, if you were advising them then, Tessa?
Well, it could have been so good, couldn't it, just a few years ago, but it isn't as it might have very briefly been.
Are you talking then about Harry and Meghan and the role they could have played?
Yeah, that was the fantasy, and we always have to live with reality. There have been impressive efforts by William, incredibly by Charles, pushing that environmental agenda. My worry there, and forgive the metaphor, they're skating on quite thin ice, because that's going to become very quickly very political about how we deal with climate crisis. So while it has been impressive, and right back to Philip, he didn't really believe in climate crisis. He's a huge environmentalist. They've been consistent campaigners, but I worry a bit how far that will take.
Well, I mean, the only thing is, you've got to look at William with Earthshot. He's not exactly being controversial. He's creating a situation where you give people who are coming up with solutions to problems vast amounts of money to continue their research. I actually think that his attitude towards climate change and is more positive. It's to say, look, we put a man on the moon, we must be able to do something to save our planet. I don't think that anybody's going to call that political, because at the end of the day, saving the planet is got to be what was and we're finding little solutions, solutions that will help towards that. And I think with Charles, of course, he has said and done what he's done all the last 40 years. We know what he thinks, and I think he's now going to play a role less outspoken, as we saw with the thing, more as a convener, bringing people together that can make a political decision and make things happen. So I don't think there's going to be an issue on that. I think what their narrative going forward seems to me, anyway, to be to connect with a more racially and religiously divided diverse country, which I believe that Charles absolutely is someone who's done an awful lot of good work for that over many, many years. And clearly with William and Kate, they work with mental health and they work with issues that a few years ago would have been seen as something we wouldn't even bring into the public domain, has been very positive.
I hear all of that. I worry, because I'm a champion of monarchy, but I worry that this isn't speaking to the younger generation in the way that Elizabeth and Philip spoke to their young generation.
It is Harry and Meghan's world. We're all just living in it, quite literally. That is because Prince Harry and Meghan are apparently planning to build their own world in a new virtual universe in an effort to reach millions more fans. What is this all about?
Well, I mean, that is the big question. And even Zuckerberg doesn't really understand or can't really define what the metaverse is. But this is Harry and Meghan trying to carve out a plot of land in the metaverse for themselves. And most experts who I've spoken to and who've tried to explain
SW1
to me, exactly, have said that this is smart. They've done the Netflix and the Spotify, and that this, and a lot of celebrities are doing this, and it'll sort of be like a place where they can talk to their fans or people who they're trying to convince, people they're trying to campaign or lobby. So almost like a virtual conference centre that will be Meghan and Harry Centre.
If I
the
pay
best
my
way to
Bitcoin,
explain
can
it.
I see a virtual Montecito mansion?
That's a sort of idea that, I mean, that they're just dipping their toe in it, but that's the sort of idea where they will host events that would be, presumably about all the issues that they are banging their drums for and so on. So
it's another platform.
It's another platform. It's getting in to another platform.
Do our royal family need to be doing a virtual butt pal?
I think that will all happen. If the metaverse
somebody else
happens,
might claim it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe you get squatters' rights. Exactly, you can just go in and stick down your...
Can we talk to the late Queen? Can we have an avatar of Elizabeth?
I think this all becomes too much for me. I don't think I can cope with it.
Well, it's maybe not trying to appeal to your generation.
How rude!
Well, I'm thinking this is all about reaching out to the younger generation and the relevancy of the monarchy.
That's where, and I'm worried about being shouted down by Robert, but that's where this generation gap takes place. They are, I agree, very popular at the moment, the royal family, but that 55% positive tick is all in the upper echelons of the population.
I'm not going to be shouted down, but I think if you actually stop just looking at what's there on the... Go out and go to cover a couple of events. You'll see the real people, thousands of pounds. People are turning up, more people than ever before. So the proof of the pudding is in actually going and seeing the events.
But this is a very different kettle of fish, because the world that Harry and Meghan are trying to conquer or be a part of is the world of the global influencer. Yeah. That's very different from the world of a member of the royal family who wants to be popular, cutting a ribbon at somewhere in the UK. That is really important for the royal family, but they don't consider themselves. No, exactly. They consider themselves to be in the world of the global influencer, which is very different.
Well, they're being honoured with an award at the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights event, $1 million to sit at the top table with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
Are you digging into your pocket?
No. All I'm saying is, we do know how those things work, all of us, that people are invited to get these great honours because they know they're going to put the bums on the seats and get the $1 million. So, sometimes I'd like to know what exactly they're being honoured for.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel quite political, doesn't it? And I do mean
it's
political.
all nicely staged.
But I mean sort of political with a capital P, as in it does feel like all these things feel like something somebody would do who eventually has an eye.
You get something out of it.
Has an eye on politics. Now, I don't know whether Meghan is going to go into politics.
Oh, for sure.
But all of this makes sense, doesn't it?
As I was listening to the latest episode of her podcast, that is exactly what was going through my mind when she was talking about activism and how she had been asked by someone influential before she got married not to stop that activism for women and girls.
But, and lest we forget, historically, America has always been envious of the tinsel and the mystique and the baubles that come with our royal family. They have, in effect, an elective kingship. Well, Meghan's got the prince. Now she just needs to get herself into position to become the elected
into the White House.
She probably needs a few more quid, to be honest.
But that's what so much of this is about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got to be. I mean, when was the last non-multi-billionaire president. I mean, it's I think you go back as far as Jimmy Carter. He had a few quid.
Well, as Tina Brown pointed out, they're
you
poor
really
by Hollywood standards.
Yeah.
They're poor by
They
Washington.
may think that they've got the publicity and all that,
Standards.
but I just think she gets quite bruised quite easily, doesn't she, when she gets criticism? You get into the American political system, I think it might be a little bit.
But don't you think when we start talking about events that are $1 million a seat, that's when you start thinking this
It's a fundraiser.
It's a political fundraiser. You can see how successful this one is, and then have a few more, and in 5 or 10 years' time, you can see that the war chest might have built up.
I would suggest that with an autobiography titled Spare, she's got the ideal elective consort, does she not, in Harry? He's already had the training.
Well, he becomes her spare.
Or ex.
On the subject of her podcast, and Robert, you talk about her being bruised. One of her guests this week, Jamil, talks about that. She describes the unfathomable amount of that Meghan has taken. And it's interesting, actually, because we've talked about Meghan's voice coming through loud and clear in this podcast, and sometimes she's been criticised for too much. Actually, she sits back this one and
it's improved. I think it's improved, and like anybody in the media business, she's probably realised it's not. If you are interviewing someone, it shouldn't always be about you. It should be about the people being interviewed and letting them have a voice. And that's certainly coming across now more and more.
Jamil's a real champion of hers.
Oh,
isn't she?
I
She
think
talks
so.
about
Yeah, but I think
Meghan
she did
reaching
come
out
across
to women
better.
who are going through a tough time privately as well. Is this podcast a way of Meghan answering back to some of the criticisms,
for
but
sure.
also trying to show a side of her? These are a lot of her friends and supporters talking.
This is her camp.
Is it a rebrand?
Absolutely. I don't think it's necessarily a rebrand. I think it's building on old Meghan. She's taken what she can from the ancient institution that is monarchy. She's enjoyed the trappings, and she's reparked her guns on the big lush lawns of America. And she's showing the world her voice in a way that she felt was muzzled. What did she expect, by the way, when she was within the institution? But this is, I think, what Meghan was always about prior to marrying Harry. Harry emboldened her. He made sure that she's that together they're more than the sum of their parts.
It's interesting you say Harry's emboldened her, because often it's described the other way round, isn't it? That she's emboldened him.
Both. Come on. We wouldn't be... Meghan who? Meghan who?
You're going to get well trolled in a minute, aren't you?
I know, it's scary. Actually, that's the one thing I do sympathise. Even I had a go at one of her biographers, I mean, just in a sort of professional context. And I've never had trolling like it. There is something about the extreme ends
very
of both
frightening.
camps.
On both.
Both sides.
Yeah,
Scary.
they are armies.
Yeah.
And they are ready to go into battle at the drop of a hat. And if you get caught in that crossfire, it's really scary.
But what's good here with these latest podcasts is, I think, instead of her saying "poor me," it's at least it's other people saying "poor you."
Well, and of course, Jamil and Meghan have a lot in common. I mean, they have one enemy in common, who is our colleague Piers Morgan, who has had battles with both of them very, very publicly.
But he can take it.
And they were referring to him not by name. If you
What did
knew
they
the
call him?
stories, so when Jamil talks about being attacked by the media, she is talking about Piers. They had this very, very big public spat. After which, she said that she had been suicidal. So very, very heightened emotions, and their sort of hatred of the British tabloid media came across very clear in the podcast. I think Jamil's campaigns that she's done on body image and anorexia and celebrities selling dodgy diet pills and all that, they have been really, really good. And I thought she was quite honest in the podcast, where she said that she had overstepped the mark quite a few times and realised that she'd talked about things that she didn't truly understand, and she'd learnt her lesson. I actually thought it was really interesting
I thought that
and
was
quite
refreshing
admirable
to hear. Yeah, I did. Now, Prince William visited the England football team at St George's Park earlier in the week ahead of the World Cup in Qatar. But the Prince of Wales has come under fire from Welsh actor Michael Sheen, who deemed it inappropriate and questioned if William was not embarrassed to be offering the England team support, particularly when they're in a group with Wales. Robert, you were making noises during
Well, he's
that.
the president. All his life is put in England. Yeah. He's president of the FA, which is the English, I think that's just daft. I mean, when it comes to football, you are allowed to support a team. No, but then today he's come out and said he's rooting for both. Well, let's just see when they're playing. If it's a crucial match, let's see who you cheer when the goal goes in and cheer when it goes in the other end. Because
But if he wants acceptance from the people of Wales,
you can't fake something like that. Despite my accent, I was born in Scotland, and I remember the first time I ever went to an English football match, and I was in Wembley, and I was a young adult, and everyone was going, England! And I couldn't shout it. I couldn't, because I was hardwired. That's when I realised, underneath it all, I'm a Scot. Doesn't matter the Scots don't like the way I speak, I'm a Scot.
Which is why you don't have to worry about the World Cup,
we
really.
are running out of time. We are running out of time. I really quickly want to squeeze in one thought. Mike Tyndall in the jungle, slut dropped in front of Princess Anne, flashed his pants.
Yeah.
Nibble my nuts.
Nibble my nuts.
She said, I'd rather not.
I know.
Certainly going to be a great talking point over Christmas.
I think he might win. I've said since before it started, he was my tip for winner, and I still think he might win.
So you think he's a positive?
Yeah.
Is it good for the royal family?
Well, it'd be good if we get Harry and Meghan going in, I think. That'd be great, wouldn't it? They could be the new Pete and Pete.
I did worry they might, as a couple, they might be short of money when I heard he was going in. I think that he's carried it off well. He's very likeable. But it's no revelation. The posher the party, the more lewd and crude it gets. So there we go.
That is all we've got time for this week. My thanks to Daisy, Robert and Tessa. We will be back next week with all of the latest on the royal family, and we hope you can join us again. We'll see you then.